I'm going to walk through some of the features of this flush cart. For example, we have a 10-inch diameter tall piece of PVC pipe. Obviously, it's got a solvent weld cap on the bottom of it. It is 40 inches tall, 3 foot 4 inches tall. Again, this is 10-inch diameter. One of the key components is you must have vertical height so that the return air bubbles will rise to the surface and dissipate. More on some of the internal components of that in a moment. Coming down here now, we have a high head, high flow pump. This happens to be a Myers QP15 pump. It's been a industry mainstay for a very, very long time. Although this pump now is they've changed the motor on it, and now it's about a 20 amp, 21 amp pump. So you got to take care in making sure the amps draw of your pump so that it's going to be supported in the field by a wall outlet. So that's a very key component when selecting that pump. But high head, high flow. This particular pump is mounted in the vertical position, and because it's mounted in a vertical position, we have actually added a volute vent so that when you go to add fluid into this system, you'll need to burp that volute, get the air out so that the pump will actually successfully prime. Some other key components here and why they're in their location. Down here we have our 1-inch ball valve with a hose connection. This is going to be for bringing in either your water, in most cases, but on larger projects you may want to actually draw your antifreeze solution in by using your flush pump here. Over here we've got a ball valve, and it's directed between the suction line of the pump and the vessel, the tank. That is for the ability to power flush. That's where we will actually use the pump and the city or municipal water pressure to help accelerate flushing that air out. It's a very, very nice feature to have it in that particular location. We also have a discharge valve here so that you can pump out the reservoir. Kind of a nice feature, and also drain it. Now let me show you some of the components and the features on the back of this flush cart. It's important when you're building a flush cart or you're purchasing a flush cart that it actually has the ability to fit through your typical doorways and hallways. We recommend that you use a good quality hand truck with pneumatic wheels, because remember, a lot of job sites are muddy. If you put the narrow hard tires on there, you're probably going to sink into the mud. So a good pneumatic tire on the hand truck, again one that has some beefiness to it to support some of the weight of this. Down here you're going to see that we have cam lock fittings to go to our flush hoses. We're going to show those flush hoses here in just a moment. But cam lock connectors, they're a nice feature. Down here we have on the return side coming into the tank, we have an 80 mesh screen or an 80 mesh filter. Okay, you want to make sure you capture any debris before it goes back in through your pump. Always make sure that this is on the return side before it ever gets not only into your system but also in through this flush cart. Coming past the 80 mesh screen filter, we have a discharge valve. If you needed to reject some water out of your tank, if you needed to reject some water out of your loop so that you can introduce your antifreeze, we're going to show that in another video. You can actually start to close off this particular ball valve, forcing some of that water out this direction. Okay. Obviously, throughout this system, we have full port ball valves. You don't want any choke points. You want to make sure your maximum flow, maximum velocity out of that particular pump. And here we've installed a Peach plug adapter. That's an important component, especially in its location here on the return side, but prior to your isolation valve. This is where you're going to make sure that you have removed all the air. We're going to show you that in the next associated video. Please don't hard pipe a pressure gauge here, because typically when you're moving around in and out of vehicles, up and down stairs, it could easily get broken off. So it's best if you use a gauge with a probe so that you can remove it, put this cap on. Now you have very minimal exposure for any kind of mishaps on the site or transporting to and from. We also want to recommend that you put in a heavy gauge wire, typically, oh golly, a number 12 wire. Okay, molded plug, grounded. Okay, this one's probably about 20 to 25 feet. You don't want to get them terribly long because you start to have voltage and amperage drop. We have a ground fault interrupted outlet that is also offering us the protection with our watertight switch. It's important to have a watertight switch to turn the pump on and off. You don't want to have to run and try and pull an extension cord if something goes wrong. A hose comes loose, you start to overflow the tank. You need to be able to kill that pump, and right now. So it's important to have a watertight switch right here on the cart so you can operate that pump effectively. On this return side coming back into the tank, we're going down inside the tank about 13 inches. And on the bottom of that 13-inch piece of pipe, we have put a T horizontally so that as the return fluid is coming back carrying some air bubbles, they will shoot to the sides of that tank and start to rise up this vessel and dissipate out. You never want to return a pipe straight down, because at the velocity that these kinds of pumps will produce, you could blow your air bubbles right back down to the suction line and take them right back out in the loop field, which means you're going to be there for a very long time not successfully getting that air out. So it's the little stuff that'll get you guys. Make sure you're applying these components as we're describing, because we want you to be successful. We want you to be able to get the air out and go home. So we're going to go through a lot of the other components and the steps of flushing in just a moment, but I also wanted to point out another very important feature. This is a sight tube. Okay, it's a 3/8 inch vinyl tube. Okay, so that we can see where the fluid level is, and in this case we've actually placed an O-ring. You're going to see the importance of that when we go through the flushing procedure. We'll actually move this O-ring to the fluid level, and one of the steps that is frequently missed by guys out there flushing is they don't go through the verification or a compression process, pressurization, to see if we have air. So if we have much of a fluid drop here during a deadheading process, we'll see it in the sight glass. It's difficult to look inside a vessel and determine how much drop there is, but when you put an indicator like this at the fluid level, compress it, and see what kind of drop, you get a good measurement as to whether you've gotten all that air out successfully.